I'm sitting at the table with my family and they're like, Mike, you just sit on the computer all day. What do you actually do for work? What I say is that I help software brands get found on Google. I've actually had like 2 people in my life send me links to articles that I've written because they searched for something and it came up and they're like, this is what you do. I was like, yeah, there you go.
You are now listening to Marketing Over Wine, a podcast where I chat with the marketers behind the companies and the campaigns you see in the world today. They share everything, how they got into marketing, the strategies and the tools that they use, how they charge for their services, and the mistakes and successes they have made in their career. Each episode is unfiltered and a masterclass, so come join us. I am your host as always, Olawumi Olaniyi.
Hello and welcome to the Marketing Over Wine podcast. On today's episode, I have Mike Keenan, a SaaS Content Marketer and SEO, joining me on this show. Mike has worked with several brands like Shopify, Descript, HelpScout, Fiverr, Segment, Oral, WorkRamp, and so many others, and he's helped them get new users from Google and turn them into paid accounts. Mike is also the co-founder of Peak Freelance, and I dare say that's a very popular freelance writing community. I'm a part of it, and he also co-hosts Freelance Beaters with Ashley Cummins. Thank you for joining me, Mike.
Wow, what an introduction! Thank you so much. I mean, you did a lot of the legwork there already, but thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So that's kind of been my story. I've been at it for about 10 years now.
Wow.
And I started off as a writer.
Okay.
And like writing on Upwork, right? And pitching for $25 articles online. And then over the course of a decade, it kind of turned into this whole thing. I don't even really know how it happened, but here it is. And it's even grown. Like now we have an agency and everything, like a little agency, which is kind of like an extension of my freelance work.
Okay.
In a lot of ways. So I'm excited to get into some of the things that we discussed before this.
All right then. When I reached out to you on Slack, I had a theory that you studying psychology as your first degree was or may not have impacted your journey as a marketer. And you mentioned that working in restaurants for 10 years even helped you more than your degree. So I did more research, and I also found out that besides working in restaurants, which you started at 12, you have also been a waiter, you've been a bartender, you've been a caterer, and you've also worked in customer support and so many other things. But what exactly drew you to marketing, and how did your journey in this field begin?
So I think what had happened was I had been tired of, as you noted, I grew up in restaurants. My mom worked in restaurants. We have a lot of just like restaurant workers in the family. So she got me into working in restaurants when I was about 12. And moving throughout the years, I think when I was about like 22, 23, I was starting to get kind of tired of it. Just working in restaurants because I've managed restaurants in big cities throughout the US. And again, like you said, bartending, bus. I've cleaned the kitchen floor with toothbrushes before.
Wow.
Back when I was in high school, like a legit toothbrush, cleaning gunk off the floor.
Wow.
And so, it was just after a while, like I was ready for a change, and I was living in Portland at the time, and I had a lot of friends. Like Portland is where I think some of the like digital nomad people kind of like began, like the movement began in a lot of ways, and a lot of people were freelancers.
Okay.
And they were like, hanging out. It was the typical thing back then. It was like everyone's hanging out in cafes, and they could just go to a bar and work online and everything. So I was interested. So I was chatting with a friend there, and I was like, what do you do? Like, how can I get into this? And they had said, think about your skills, right? Like, think about what skills you're good at and what you've done in the past. So again, like the psychology degree, like at that point was out the window. And I kind of had to lean into the things that I was already that I was kind of good at. And that was like relationships, being able to treat customers the right way, make sure they're getting what they need, all these things that happen in restaurants. And then also, like you had mentioned, that was a brief stint doing like online customer support. That was within the whole freelance journey. So that's kind of how I started making a little bit of money on the side, like doing that customer support. And then, I kind of went on Upwork, and it's, again, like Upwork is not the same as it was.
Honestly.
Not the same now as it was back then. It was right when it was Elance, which was before Upwork.
Yeah.
And it was a little different of a game. So the long story short is that I started writing articles about things I knew. I was more familiar then with yoga. So I was writing like these $25 pop articles about yoga.
Okay.
The benefits of water was like another one. No bylines, no nothing. I don't know where these articles went.
Yeah.
It was just someone paid me for them, and then they deposited the money into my account. The Elance, which became Upwork throughout that time, took their 20% or whatever it was, and I was left with like beer money. So that's how it started. And then that's what got me into marketing in general, was like the writing element of it. And I think as most writers eventually kind of, it depends. Like, it depends on how motivated or what your like aspirations are for writing. Some people prefer to stay the course of a writer, and that's for them, and it works for a lot of people. Yeah. But other people kind of want a little more, just to switch it up, evolve, Yeah. So kind of taking those skills as a writer, I learned more SEO. I learned more about content management and operations, and I've kind of took all of that with me along the years, which has kind of like come to this kind of like where I am right now.
Content marketing.
Yeah, content marketing person. Yeah. So, and at the moment, I do have a freelance, like my freelance business, and then I have the separate agency.
Okay.
And the freelance does a lot of like smaller projects and consulting, and then the agency does bigger lift projects. So we're working with like 10 to 12 contractors per project on the agency, but it's very small. It only picks up like 2-3 clients at a time.
Okay.
And so, I'm kind of like in between right now, but this is the way I like to work.
Okay.
I've never been the type of person to like want a big mega agency. I've never had that aspiration. I just want a workflow that works for me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I've landed myself here all the way from the beginning.
I was going to ask you, those articles you didn't even have any idea about at the beginning. How did you start all of those? Did you take any course to teach yourself how to write?
Not for writing. And I think that's because here's actually where my degree played in.
Okay.
All in with me. Yeah, like that's because I know you mentioned it. So I used to write research papers in college, and I worked in a research lab. So I used to run participants and do write-ups for obviously the professor.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned how to do that's just where I learned how to write good.
Okay.
Was by writing the research papers. And I always got good marks on the research papers. So I kind of had like some idea of how to write already.
Okay.
And then, when people are paying you $25 for an article, I don't even know if those early articles were good, but they were good enough to pass.
Yeah.
So the courses, actually, there were two things that I learned. One was actually working with this client. They're a luxury brand out of Australia. They helped me learn like more SEO writing.
Yeah.
And then I also did, back in the day, I took Ahrefs blogging course.
Oh, okay.
And like, cause they teach you, and that's like the amalgamation of everything, like SEO and blogging and everything, and it's free. So that was actually one of the courses that I've taken. And I signed up for another course, but I never took it, which is bad. As someone who has courses
we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah. So I don't even remember the course, but it sounded interesting at the time. But I don't remember what it was, but I never took it. But I think, like practical experience is the best course that you can do,
Yeah.
And then following through on like the Ahrefs stuff. Ahrefs also has an amazing blog where if you want to just learn SEO stuff, like outside of standard course, I learned so much through Ahrefs. Everything back early on.
This feels like a shout out to Ahrefs. They should pay. They should bring their coins, by the way, for these free adverts.
Well, here's the kicker, and I hate to admit it, but I don't use Ahrefs anymore. But they did give me a lot during the day, so I'll drink a little tequila since we're on an alcohol podcast.
Cheers to that.
I'm sorry, Ahrefs, but yeah, I'm not going to say who I use now, but like I don't want to promote another brand, but yeah, I've stopped using Ahrefs over the years. However, anyway.
A quick thing to add, if you haven't subscribed yet and you love the content of Marketing Over Wine, please do so and share with all your friends. Now let's get back to the episode.
So if you were to explain what you do today to, let's say, a 5-year-old or in layman terms, how would you describe SaaS content marketing? It feels like a buzzword that we hear a lot on Twitter. Almost everyone says, if you're in content marketing, people most likely think that, oh yeah, you're a SaaS content marketer. So what does that word mean? What do you do?
Sure. So if I'm sitting at the table with my family, right, and they're like,
it's Thanksgiving.
Mike, you just sit on the, it's Thanksgiving, you just sit on the computer all day. Like, what do you actually do for work? What I say is that I help software brands get found on Google, because everyone has searched something on Google before. And that's the basic way that I say it. I help software brands get found on Google. I do it through writing articles and making sure that when you search for like how to water plants, and I give them like an example that they would know, because obviously like my mom is not searching for how to mix audio, because I mean, actually she likes to play guitar, so that's a bad example, but a good example, like things that like how to water your outdoor plants, or how to water a monstera, like, and I'll say like, I'll use a query like that and then say like, when you search that, the first brand that you want to see is like, that's what I try to get them to. And that's how I explain it to everybody, because like in our own jargon, it's easy to understand, but at the end of the day, like we just get brands found on Google, and then their goal is either free users or paid users. That's up to them what they decide, what their
content marketing
customer journey looks like. What their content marketing goals are.
All right then. Speaking of which, what are some of the misconceptions that you've probably had people say about what you do?
That I do nothing. That's the biggest misconception. That I do nothing.
Okay.
That and then now, since everyone knows ChatGPT, that I just make ChatGPT write all the articles for me, which obviously if anyone that actually works in our industry would know that that's not possible. And I mean, there's no one that, like, my family doesn't. I've actually had some, like, 2 people in my life so far send me links to articles that I've written because they searched for something and it came up and they're like, oh, you actually, like, this is what you do. I was like, yeah, there you go. There's an example of what I do. But the misconception is that I do nothing. That I just sit down in the morning.
With your phone,
I have my
every day.
I have in my phone. I have my coffee. Maybe I write like 1,000 words and then I make $1,000 just poof like that. And we all know that's not the case. So that is the biggest misconception. And then I think like on a smaller scale, like a lot of people, like for example, I have friends in like manufacturing. They think like they're familiar-ish with SEO and they think I do like, do you do landing pages? Like they have some, so like I think sometimes that gets a little confused with like landing page, which I do.
Copywriting and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Copy and content. Those would be the two, like a lower level misconception. And that's not exactly wrong, but I don't do copywriting, but I will offer like landing page optimization for clients if they need it. But it's not like a common, it's more just like because it helps me. It actually, I'm optimizing their landing pages. It helps improve my results at the end of the day. So I don't write landing pages from scratch anymore, though I haven't in a long time. It's just not my thing.
All right, then. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Back then, Amy Facion, I think, she once commented that you are great at writing content that rack up conversions.
Wow, that was a name I haven't heard in a long time. Yeah.
We do our research.
I had to pull out the Rolodex there. I was like, oh my God, Amy? Like, I was like...
All right, so how do you do it? What is the secret recipe to writing content that converts and not just rack up traffic?
Well, the traffic part is the standard, right? Like, make sure you're writing relevant content for a search query. But what I do and what I think people come to me for, because this is also what I like talk about when I'm on a sales call with a software brand, is that we do, especially like, for example, within the agency, we have an entire QA layer of content production process that is just dedicated to putting product content into the articles, because you can't expect a writer to know everything about a brand, and you can't expect 12 to 15 freelancers working on a product to know every single product detail, so what I've done in the agency side of things, which is also what I do like in my own freelance stuff and what I've been doing for a while, is I'm always making sure I'm going through the help docs, I'm going through everything for this client, and I'm making sure that their product is represented well in the articles, not in like a showboaty, like look at what we can do type way, but it's a normal integration that flows with the story of the article, right? And like popping in screenshots, and if they have a YouTube channel, like plugging in a YouTube video where it makes sense. But that is the secret to the sauce. The secret sauce, not the secret to the sauce. Well, I guess
they both make sense, yeah.
But that is the secret, because also it's two-sided. Like the reader gets to see exactly how the product is used to help solve their problem. And then the client also loves it because you're showcasing their brand at the end of the day. And they do want to rank, but they also want to make sure the blog is representing them well to the people who are coming on the page. So that's actually always what I stand by. I'm always making sure that there's something related to the product. Even when I'm doing strategy, I'm looking for those more they're not always lower volume, but I'm looking for those types of keywords where I can plug in different product elements. Or screenshots, or mentions, or call outs, or videos.
All right, then. So if I'm to summarize, I would say the first step in the secret recipe, or the first ingredient in the secret recipe, is to focus on driving in traffic.
Correct.
And then when you have the traffic, you can start optimizing the article to add the products and things basically about the products. And that can in turn convert into, let's say, buying of the product, becoming paid customers. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. And again, the direct blog to paid isn't always as easy, but you can definitely get a lot of like free trials are more common from blog. But I mean, we do also work on like down funnel content, but I wouldn't say like directly traffic to like a top funnel keyword. You're usually getting the free out of that. And then the brand also should have lower funnel, like bottom funnel content available to then feed to these people in their free trial. Like email newsletters
and the like.
Newsletters, but also in the app itself. If there's like a homepage within the app, like maybe they can push relevant content to them. There's a lot of different kind of avenues to take, but that would be like the general the objective look at things.
All right. Thank you again for sharing that. Now, let's focus on the step one part of it. You're an expert at ranking content on Google. You have basically acted. Can you share some of the behind the scenes of that? How do you write content that ranks consistently? What is the magic trick to it?
That's a good question. I mean, actually, ironically, SEMrush just released a new study about like basically what it takes to rank content. And it's pretty similar to the process that I've used to create content. And a lot of it revolves around the content relevance. And we've even seen content relevance rank, like creating content that is specifically for the query, not like creating like a long ass guide for every single query that you're going after. Another part of that is having the right people write your content. So like not farming it out to, inexpensive writers, and making sure that the people who are actually writing the content have some firsthand experience on it. And we're seeing that more and more now since Google's like pushing the EEAT like guidelines for content. But so for me, when I'm like outlining content, to start there, the first thing that I'm thinking is like, all right, for this query, what's the answer that they need first? Like besides the SEO crap, right? Like the benefits of the this, that, the other thing. Like sometimes that shit needs to go in the article, and you just have to deal with it. Get over it. Everyone lives on such a fucking high horse about it, but you really don't need to. What you need to do is answer the people's questions first. Right? So like, what's the most important information that someone needs when they're searching for a query? If it's how to mix audio with video, say, the first thing you're putting in that article is the steps to get it done, or the video to get it done. And then if there's other things that you find in your research that are like related to the query, right? Like maybe, I don't know if this is actually the case for this query, but carrying along with the how to mix audio with video, in the people also ask questions, right? If someone's asking a question like, what are the benefits of doing that? Or what are some examples of doing that? That needs to go into the article as well, because that's everything that people want. Those are the questions that people have that are related to it, So we want to take those types of questions, and there's other tools, I mean, I like to pull directly from Google, but there's other tools. I don't know, I forget the name of them. Answer the Public, stuff like that. There's other ways to find the questions that people have.
Uber suggest.
There's other ways to find the questions that people have. like, don't just go to the first ranking article, which obviously, they have something going on there, but don't just go there and
replicate everything you say
and rip the outline from there. Like, there's obviously going to be some crossover, you can't help it, but look to where you can then improve upon that, right? Like, what new information needs to go into those types of pieces that the top articles are missing? What types of product content can go in there that will actually be useful and is relevant to the query. So that's kind of the things that I'm looking at that have worked really well. And then at the end of the day, I always pop an article through ClearScope, and that is not a sale. So that's not a sale. I used to be an affiliate for ClearScope, but they don't have an affiliate program anymore, and I still use it and I still promote them. So the ClearScope report for me comes all the way at the end after we've put in, like the product content, we've done the outline on our own, and the ClearScope report is like the icing on the cake, right? It's like that last finish to just like, with the best of hopes, as God willing, you're sending that article up and you're hoping that it's gonna fucking rank. So that's the way. ClearScope is like a little extra security as it's going out the door. So if that answers your question, I know it's a little bit of a ramble, but there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of thinking that goes into every piece,
Thank you for sharing that. I'll give you an example. So when I used to work as an editor, I was working with this company that needed to write about, let's say, the best breweries or the best beer that you can find in, maybe let's say, Texas. And you have people still go ahead, and the first thing they write for such an article is history of beer making. And
I know.
The question is, how does that relate to best beers or best breweries?
I know.
So it's more about giving the people what they want. If the search query is best breweries, give them the best breweries. If you want to talk about the history of beer making, all of that, even though it is very relevant, you can put it at the bottom of the article. If you're more concerned about the word count, put it at the bottom of the article and focus on the search query at the very top, where people can then see that immediately they click on the article.
Yeah, I see that a lot actually when I'm Googling recipes, because I'm a very, very mediocre cook. I do the best that I can for us, my partner and I, but I do the best that I can. But whenever I'm Googling,
you learned cooking and you were a caterer back then, and now you're focusing all of the recipes.
Maybe that's why. But to be fair, I was never a chef. I was more like line cook and like prep cooking and stuff like that. I was never a chef. Because that, again, mixing ingredients like that, I don't know if that's my forte. But whenever I'm like, it's funny you mention that, because whenever I Google these recipes, it always starts with like, my kids and I like love this recipe, and my husband and I, and my grandmother's been making this recipe for 97,000 years before humanity existed. And I'm like, I don't care. Just give me the fucking recipe. Like, tell me what I need to do right now. Like, I don't even know. That's a whole nother world. Like mommy bloggers and recipes is a whole industry I don't even want to get into too much.
All right, let's get past it then. How did you go from sending out 20 to 30 cold pitches per day on job boards? I think you mentioned that on one of your previous tweets. So how did you go from that, where you used to send 20 to 30 cold pitches per day on job boards and Upwork, to working with Shopify, Descript, WorkRamp, and HelpScout? What was the journey like?
So I mentioned in the beginning a little bit, the real turning point was actually when I learned SEO. And that was kind of like how I transitioned out of hitting job boards all the time and like pitching the Upwork connects and stuff like that. It was learning SEO that really got me out of that, because I was able to then show more, like I was able to show results from the work that I was doing, instead of just like shipping out articles to random companies. Like I'd mentioned, like I didn't even know where these articles were going. They were just people asking me for content. So that was that. But where it really took hold actually was, and I credit Jess Green, she's a director at Testbox. But Jess Green taught me how to do content refreshing. I was trying to think of the year. That's why I had a little like brain fart there, because I kind of got confused with COVID. I don't even remember when everything happened, but I think it was like 5 years ago now. Jess Green taught me how to do the content refreshing, and she taught me how to do process and everything like that. And that was where I really was able to start getting in with bigger brands, was because I had a very niche specialty that I was very good at, because Jess taught me everything that I knew. And then combining like the good writing and now like the refreshing process and everything, it all kind of came together
Yeah.
to create the workflow that I have now. And I ended up working with some of those brands through people who recommended me, who knew that I did refreshing. And around the time, like I think it was but I think it was like right around COVID in the beginning, where people started doing a lot more refreshing because everyone was cranking out so much new content.
Yeah.
Everything was kind of getting saturated and everyone was leaving content off to the side, and everyone realized it was a lot cheaper and more effective to do refreshing.
Yeah.
So kind of like catching that wave and being a little more public about it helped.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really nailing down like a specialty, and that's not every case. That's not every writer's or marketer's story. Some people are just good. Some people are good writers. Some people are good investigative journalists. Like everyone has like a very particular thing that they're good at, and that's how they get in with some of these like bigger names. You know, like Forbes, Independent. Like they have a very particular thing about them.
Yeah.
You know, like an example outside of like what I do is like Kaylee Moore, she does content ops, but she's also very good at investigative journalism within like e-commerce and fashion trends and everything. So getting yourself known about something and then letting people talk for you, I would say is pretty much like how I transitioned out of that.
Okay.
And it was constantly like a building process. Like and this is just my personality as well, is I have naturally curious. So I always wanted to know like, okay, how do I, like what's next? Or what do I add to this? And what else is there out there? Like I'm really like a 100% person, like go all the way or don't do it at all.
Yeah.
And again, that's a very particular personality type. Not everyone's like that, but that's how it's just constantly pushing.
It's a beautiful personality.
Yeah, it's just been constantly pushing since day one, and I really like what I do. You know, like obviously I have some days where I'm like, oh, this is so fucking boring, you know. But like then I have the majority. Like the thing is also really just liking what you do. To add to that,
that's true. That brings me to this question then: if you were to do it all over, would you still be a content marketer, or will you get a van and go camp somewhere, probably like the Wenatchee River? Now that Starlink is a thing.
I've done both. I did both of them at the same time. So if I had to do it all over again, I would probably do it the same exact way that I did it. So I would follow the same path, because I think I really am grateful for like the path that was laid out for me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it at all, because at this point, you know, I really love my life and I love my work, and I love that what content has given me, all the things that content has given me and like enabled me to do in this life so far.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, if I had to go back and do it all over again, I would probably follow it step by step until I got to sitting here right now talking on the Marketing Over Wine podcast.
Thank you. So most people just getting into marketing ask this question a lot. The question is, how much do I charge? And the idea behind that is usually they want to know how to set their rates, whether they're just starting out or based on the number of years of experience that they already have.
Yeah.
For you, how do you set your rates? And in the same vein, what is the right time to up those rates?
So I would say I'll answer the first part first, and then the time to up those rates.
Okay.
So setting your rates, for me, I always had an end of the year kind of income goal.
Okay.
So say, for example, like I wanted to make $95,000, pre-tax, post-tax, whatever, your choice. Say you want to make 95 grand for the year. Then I would look to see like, all right, like what does that look like? Break that out into what that looks like every month, and then break that down into what that looks like within working hours of the month.
Okay.
How long it takes you to write an article, and then kind of going backwards from the math. And I'm really bad at math without a calculator, so I can't exactly tell you what that breaks out to be. But it would be starting there. So for like, let's look at maybe on a smaller time scale. Like say it takes you 6 hours to write an article. You want to make $1,800 a week, right? So it takes you six hours to write an article. You want to make $1,800. You can do that by charging $600 an article, right? 12, 18. Yeah. And that's 12. That's 18 hours of work, and you can make $1,800 a week. And so pricing things out like that. And it's always been, for me, and it still is to this day, is what's my hourly rate? It's not what I quote forward, obviously, because I just do I do per article rate, but it's how much money do I want to make an hour?
Okay.
You know, like, do I want to make 100 an hour, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350? And like, what work can I fit into those hours to, you know, like what project, how can I break out those projects so I am making the hourly rate that I want to make?
Okay.
And so, I mean, an example is like as simple as that. It's like, if you want to make $1,800 a week and it takes you 6 hours to write an article, $100 an hour, you're only working 18 hours. That's very doable. And that's really good money, $1,800 a week,
Yeah, it is. So you're basically starting at the end and working backwards.
Yes, exactly. And again, you could do it on a smaller time frame, but I usually have like an end of the year, like income goal that I want to hit and then have to work backwards from there. So like yearly, monthly, weekly, day,
hourly,
then pricing out projects like so. Yeah, an hourly, of course. And then pricing out the projects to your fit. When it's the right time to up those rates. So this is actually like a 2-part answer. And the second part, I actually don't have like the right answer for. So maybe if someone else could fill me in how it works. But in the beginning, I was upping my rates every single new client that I got. I never did the same. I never priced the same for each new client.
Okay.
Even if it was like a 5%, $50, $100 per article, like I was upping it every single time because I was like, I have more clients, I have more samples to show for.
Yeah.
That's how I did it. So for me, it was every time I got a new client, I was upping the rate, even if it was $25, a small amount, just so I was making more money. But there is a price ceiling, and anyone will tell you that there is a price ceiling. It's very different for everybody. Some people make $1,650 an article. Some people I've talked to make $2,200 an article, but everyone has a ceiling.
Okay.
So there does come a point where like you really can't up your rates anymore because you price yourself out of the market.
Yeah.
And so that's where you kind of have to get creative, and that's the second part that I don't have an answer to. So like the thing is like the thing for me was like keep upping the price until someone said no, and then when someone said no, why?
Yeah.
Like what could I do then to show how much I'm worth? And maybe it's like learn SEO, learn how to write product content, learn how to write case studies, whatever.
Yeah.
The best thing about freelance writing and marketing in general is that you can create any path that you want to create. There's no one there to limit you besides yourself. So you can kind of just keep segueing and moving into different sectors and like create this whole like beautiful scheme for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, and then you just keep going up until you find what your glass ceiling is.
Okay.
And I haven't upped my rates. I haven't upped my rates in quite some time because for me, I like my rates. I'm comfortable with them. My clients are comfortable with them, and I'm not looking to. I'm happy with everything, So, and I've definitely hit a glass ceiling. I've definitely hit like a very not glass. If it was glass, we could go through it. But for me, it's been a ceiling, and I'm not interested in going past it at this point in time. So,
all right. Speaking of money, since you've brought that up now, what's the least you have been paid, and what's the most you have been paid as a SaaS content marketer?
Are you talking like per article?
Yeah, per article, per project, per gig, any of them.
Well, the least was, on a per article rate, the least I've been paid was $25 an article, right? That was like the least back in the day.
Okay.
And then the most I've ever gotten was like, I think it was $1.10 per word.
Wow.
And that because, like based on word count. And again, that was kind of like a trial thing. I really didn't like the pricing by word, but I did try it. And I don't have those clients anymore, but that was not like 1.1 per word.
Yeah.
1.1 per word was the highest I've ever been paid. And given the standard articles, like 2,000, 2,500 words, we can let the listeners do the math from there. I think
that's beautiful.
It is, but it's the thing with that is it's such a, oh my God, I forget what the metaphor, not a metaphor. It's such a catch-22 because great, you're making $2,000 an article. That's amazing, right? But per word count is very hard for clients to budget. I mean, like I said, those clients that I was charging by word for a little bit, I don't have any of them anymore. The only ones that I've retained over the years, and I don't ever lose clients. I keep them for a very, very long time.
Okay.
And the only ones that I've retained are the ones where I'm on like a very, like, this is the rate. We both know exactly, they know they're getting an article. I know I'm getting this amount, and we're all very happy with each other. One very happy family. So.
All right, then. Thank you for sharing that again.
Sure.
Different marketers have different methods for getting hired. I've asked you something like this earlier on. Someone on Twitter once shared that for him, he writes blogs that B2B SaaS CMOs will see and want to hire him because of those articles he has written. Mm-hmm. Other people say they focus on building a personal brand on LinkedIn.
Yep.
You see them making posts day to day on LinkedIn about something they feel people will want to hire them for.
Okay.
Other people again use Instagram. For you, what is yours? So what moves the needle the most for you?
Yeah, so all of those things never worked for me. So things that you mentioned. the people that come through me from stuff that they read online, they are always the shittiest leads. They never have enough money. They never have anything, really. They don't have a strategy. So in the beginning of Mark, I actually have a podcast episode with Elise about this also.
Yeah.
That Elise Dobson for record. In that I actually took I had a mentor back in the day, and he was very like low key. Not in he's not a marketer. He's in UX design.
Okay.
But he's a very low key, like never promotes his brand, keeps his like circle very small. And I did that, for a little bit after I kind of started getting after I came off Upwork. And then I thought I needed to be all like in the public eye and everything. And I really hated it.
Yeah.
I really hated being in the public eye, and nothing, it wasn't working, and it's just not for me. And so I went back to kind of like just being quiet. And what it's always been was my client relationships are very, very good.
Okay.
In terms of like, I bend over backwards. I'm constantly like bothering them in Slack I'm like, tell me what I need to do to be better. Like, how else can we support the brand? What else do you need from me? I'll do anything. Backflips out the window, And so what that's done, that type of attitude, again, that's coming, doing full circle. That's like that restaurant mentality, right? Like the customer's always right. I'll do anything for them.
Yeah.
And everything comes through referral now. I've not gotten one good client in recent years that wasn't through someone telling someone about me.
Wow.
Then they contact me through email, and then we set up a call and we go from there. The whole like doing the LinkedIn, I know it works. I mean, Brooklyn Nash is like his whole agency runs off of his like LinkedIn acquisition and everything, but I don't have the desire or the energy to be creating LinkedIn content and Instagram content and blog content and Twitter content. I spend all my day in front of a fucking computer as it is. I don't want to be spending more time in front of a computer. Once I'm done, once the computer's off, I'm done. Like, I have no interest in creating content. And so that's kind of been my story in that sense. So that's how client acquisition comes from referrals, but that comes from having good client relationships.
Okay.
And like I said, like a lot of my clients I have for years, I don't really lose a lot of them unless I'm charging per word, which I've always lost. So I'm not worth it, I guess. I'm not worth $1 or plus a word. So
before this podcast, you sent this email where you said you prefer talking more about content operations rather than content strategy.
Yeah.
So now imagine that someone reaches out to you and says that they are trying to learn content operations. They're trying to build a content operations framework.
Yeah.
And they want to learn from you how to build one. How do you build your content operations framework, and what's the process like for you?
Oh my God, dude, we're gonna need a whole nother podcast episode to go through how to build the content from scratch. To try and like shorten that up.
Okay.
So for me, let's start with that. The content operations involves freelancers, right? Because there's a lot of talk in recent years, about like, and a lot in the past like 18 months, a lot of people have moved in-house or getting rid of freelancers and everything.
Yeah.
And it's been a real mess, like from what I've seen from other brands and stuff, and just from talking to other writers.
Okay.
So when you are building a content operation, what I'm referring to is working with freelancers. And what I like to do is, obviously everything starts with a good brief, right? That has to be, but it even goes back to before the briefing, right? And when I'm running the agency side of things and I'm working with the freelancers, I don't put too much on the freelancers. And maybe that's because I am a freelancer. Like, I worked with one company one time and they had a fucking onboarding call. There was like 4 different platforms to sign up for. There was like another thing you had to do. You had to talk to the finance team, and I was like, get out of here. And then they ended up shutting down the operation like 3 months later. I was like, this was such a waste of time. So the beginning of all of the good content operations, if you want to work with good freelancers, is by not overwhelming them to start with. So I keep everything in Google Tables. Tables. It's in beta in the US. And it's where everyone sees everything. My onboarding email is a document that says like, this is the client. Like, I know already going out when I'm looking for everyone, like who's going to be a good fit for this client. So they have the tone of voice. They have all the information they need with like the help docs and how to find product content and everything. And then outside of that, it's keeping things pretty damn simple. Like we give the writers 10 days to write a first draft. The editors have 3 days to turn around the editing draft. So you can produce a good article within 2 weeks. right? Which is like kind of a goal. I think that's a good time frame to put out good content, especially at scale, where you're working on multiple articles at one time. So keeping everything in that one place, giving everyone very clear expectations and time frames. But I think the biggest bottleneck that we see that everyone tries to solve for happens in the editing, right? Like they think the freelancer isn't that good, but they never gave the freelancer all the information that they needed to write on behalf of the brand. And like the thing is also with some content managers, they expect so much from the freelancers, they don't want to do any of the work themselves. Well, tough shit. Like you can't expect a freelancer to know everything about a brand. So one of the ways that we solve for the bottleneck, and I do this at an agency scale, it's not even, you can do this in-house a lot easier. You hire one person to QA every single article after editing, and that QA person makes sure the article is just fantastic. And they can add product content in there. They can, like add a video if it's needed. And that has sped up. I don't know, on LinkedIn recently we posted about it. The one thing I did post on LinkedIn, but the agency put out in just about 20 days, we put out 90 articles at the end of it in December, because we had a big client expectation to meet. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't 90. Oh my God, it was 50. Jesus, sorry. It was 90. 90 was, we did 90 over 6 weeks, but we did 50 within those 2 weeks. So, and that QA layer was massive. Also, I spend a shit ton of money on good writers. That's the other part. Like you can't get good writing. You can't expect to have a good content operation if you're not working with good writers. The editors, they're well-versed in the brand. And then that QA layer speeds everything up. Like by the time it comes to the end, where it's time to ship, that thing is clean. We never get edits back, ever, from a client, because we hire good writers, we have good editors, we have a QA person go in and make sure the QA person is the key. And they are the person that works on behalf of the client for like the agency. Like they're not a client, but like the goal is for them to pretend they're the client. If they're reading us, like, is this good? Like, is this good enough to be on the client's blog? If yes, get it out there. If no, add what it needs and like, let's get it moving. And I think overall in general, everyone complicates content operations, and it's really not that complicated at all. It's actually really quite simple. You need good writers, you need a good editor to be real with the writers, and then you need a QA person. And you need a content manager to get involved as well.
Definitely. So you were able to summarize it down to, I think, about 2-3 minutes ish.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I could go into the tool stacks and everything, but we really don't have enough time. So it's like,
behind you, there are lots of books behind you. So speaking of them, what books aren't on marketing, but marketers need to read them? Which would you recommend?
Okay. This one, definitely. Company of One by Paul Jarvis.
Okay.
Yeah, you may have heard of it. A lot of people have heard of it. Paul Jarvis is a great guy. He's also really smart. There's also... I have them all in one place. That's nice. There's also Content Design by Sarah Richards. Also a very good book related to content. And then How to Make Sense of Any Mess by Abby Covert. And this isn't related really to marketing, but it's very broad. I wouldn't say broad, actually. It helps you make sense of a mess no matter what type of mess it is, no matter what industry you're in. It's like a framework to look at things. And I feel like this is like what helped me put together like a more simplified operation. Because every operation is so nuts that I've been a part of that I'm like, why are we making things so difficult? And again, there's a lot of factors that go into it. If you're producing 300 articles a month, that's that's a lot of content. But but like we're talking like there's so much complications when people are producing like 16 articles a month and it takes them forever. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You're wasting so much money like this. But anyway, so How to Make Sense of Any Mess is a really good one if you just want to like simplify your work and your life even. So I would definitely recommend those 3. And then I think that's it. This is also a really good one by Maddie Osman, Writing for Humans and Robots. This is a good one for writers and marketers.
In the areas of content style.
Yeah, and she has like super specific examples. I know if this is on, I know we're on video, but if this is on audio also, you're not gonna be able to see it. But yeah, she's got really specific like examples from her years of running her agency, and it's just a really great book. So I would also recommend that. and I'd also recommend reading fiction books.
Definitely.
Because it teaches you how to tell a story. So I like to read a lot of fiction.
Definitely. At the beginning, you mentioned having an agency. Mm-hmm. How do you spot the right hire for your agency? What are the signs that you understand what you need them to do, the roles and the responsibilities?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes from, I will say I'm privileged enough to have like Peak Freelance. Yeah. So there are a lot of writers that I already know who are going to be good for a project. Like, I know that's not the case for everybody, but if you are looking to hire writers, like I would go into Peak Freelance as a content manager or strategist or whatever, and I would look for people, in the group, because so what I do is I'll just go and I'll look and see if this writer has experience writing about the topics that I'm writing about. You can put a call out also and then just vet people. But I am looking for experience, right? Because the agency works within the confines of SEO. 90% of the content is to get it to rank online that we work on.
Yeah.
So working with writers who have experience in the topics that we're talking about obviously helps. Yeah. It allows you to produce content from a unique perspective as well versus just like someone who's ripping from page one.
Yeah. So are you hiring presently?
At the moment, actually, no, we're not. Okay. So I'm at the client peak, the client maximum for Peak Agency. So we'd have to lose a client in order to gain a client to then hire writers. But if someone drops off, do you want to throw your name in the hat?
Definitely. I would love to.
Yeah, you're on my list if something comes up. But yeah, so we have a client maximum because I just am way too lazy and I don't care enough to grow a big agency. So I want a small operation. Maybe I'm also a control freak. I don't know. Could be all those things. But.
All right, then. Now, when I was reading out the bio, I mentioned that you worked with Shopify, Descript, and a host of other leading brands. And that's really huge. Those accomplishments and those successes along your career journey are really huge. But let's spin that around and let's give it a twist.
Okay.
What has also been your career's biggest challenges and how did you overcome them?
My career's biggest challenge. My career's biggest challenge. Let me think. That's a good question. I would say the biggest challenge for me was actually creating Peak Freelance.
Okay.
Granted, Elise created Peak Freelance and she brought me on early enough where I could call myself a co-founder. But I think which is true, it was a Patreon group. And I think she made the Patreon group in October and then asked me in November to like expand the brand with her.
Okay.
And that's how it was early enough to where I became a co-founder. I was granted the privilege of being co-founder from her. So she shared her brand with me.
Okay.
But I would say that was actually the biggest challenge of my career thus far, because it forced me to come out of my shell. And it forced me to have to like be more public.
Okay.
And I still don't really like being public, but I'll chat you up in Slack. That's fine. But it did force me to come out of my shell. And that was a real challenge because I wasn't used to, I always looked at freelancing from the perspective of like, I'm solo and I like being solo and I don't want like people around me.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into, that was my, my feelings and my perspective when I went into freelancing originally.
Yeah.
Because that's what I knew it as, right? Like the single person sitting in a coffee shop typing on the computer. But through like coming out of my shell and growing Peak Freelance as a community, it really did like, it was a challenge. It was like a mental challenge to do that and put myself out in public like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I really, I couldn't imagine now working without having the people that I met in Peak Freelance in my life, like all the things that Peak Freelance has brought us, like I talk to Elise every morning on this thing, like until she's done with work in the UK. So, which is like now. So that was the challenge, was creating content that was going to be more publicly viewed and just like me representing a brand, which is weird.
All right. So what's your best piece of advice today for aspiring and new marketing professionals?
Yeah. Do things on your own, even if you're working in-house. Build a separate blog for you, build a separate brand, whatever, Instagram, whatever platform you want to use. Build your own brand for yourself, because that company may not be your company forever. You can get laid off, you can get whatever, and then maybe at some point you just don't want to work for a company anymore. But if you already have like a repertoire of things that represent you and can show that you're a good writer or a good marketer or whatever, it puts you in a lot better position when you are pitching and someone comes or someone just finds you online. You know, like one of my clients that I have, so I made a tweet, like, I don't even remember, in like 2021 or something. And it was like, I was complaining because I wanted to get like pricing about a product, and the only way I could get pricing was if I scheduled a meeting with the people. And I just hate that because I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to know the price. And I tweeted about it. And then in my email communications with my now client, they referenced that tweet. So it's even like the smallest thing, right? Like when people want to work with you, they go and look for you online, whether you think they do or not, whether they show you or not. So everything that you put out represents you. And so, you know, that would be my tip is like, even if you are, whether you're freelance, whether you're in-house, start building something for yourself. And something that you own, because no company can own what you put out for yourself, unless you're putting it on the company account. But that's the point.
I think a lot of us make that mistake early. I kept putting off marketing over wine for the longest of time till the layoff happened. And yeah, I think many of us make that mistake.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did it. So that's Thankfully. The important part.
Winding down, what are some of the tools that you use day to day to make your work as a SaaS content marketer easier?
All right, you're gonna love this. So I use the Notes app on my computer, on my Apple computer, on my Mac computer. I use it every single day. I use Trello for freelance stuff. I use Google Tables for the agency calendars. And then I use FreshBooks for the freelancing, and then I use QuickBooks for the agency, for if that matters, an accounting software. And then I use SEMrush and then for my tool. So it all came out. If anyone's been listening this whole time, which I hope you have, now you know what I use. I switched to the biggest.
I was about to say that you already put out.
I switched to the biggest competitor. I switched to the biggest competitor. And don't ask me why, because I'm not going to answer it in public. So, and then outside of that, that's my toolkit. And then obviously like the Google Workspace, obviously. So I track so much shit in Google Sheets that I should just create a SaaS product on top of my Google Sheets. It's not pretty. They don't look pretty, but everything is in there. So yeah, that's my tool stack. It's very simple. I keep it pretty, well, I guess also anything that's Google, right? Like Google Analytics, Google Search Console, Google Docs, Google, but that should go without saying.
All right. You brought tequila, but beside tequila, what is your favorite type of wine?
Sauvignon Blanc. I do love Sauvignon Blanc.
Looks like the favorite among many of the people I've talked to.
Yes, I love them dry. I love really dry, like crisp wine.
Dry white wine,
Yeah, more crisp, and that's Sauvignon Blanc, the ones from New Zealand, right? Yeah, Marlborough. I'm not a wine snob, so I really don't know all these things, but I'm pretty sure it comes from New Zealand.
I think it's the same thing. When I was talking to Grace Nikkei, she mentioned loving Sauvignon Blancs too. I think it's from New Zealand also that she talked about. Yeah,
from Marlborough. They have I love the wines that come out of there, the Sauvignon Blancs in particular. So that is my favorite type of wine. And I would be drinking it if it wasn't 10 o'clock in the morning when we started doing this. So.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Where can we go to find you? I know you don't like being found on social media, but where can we go to find you?
Yeah, I'm over it now. That was the past me. But yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, where I'm not active. You can find me on LinkedIn, where I'm not active either. you can join Peak Freelance and Slack, where I'm not active either. So those are all the places that you can find me. Your best chances of getting in touch with me are inside of Slack, but also I don't have X or Twitter on my phone. I probably go on Twitter and LinkedIn like once a week. But if you can figure out who I am on Reddit, then you can probably find me there. But I can't give that away because Reddit's anonymous. So
thank you so much once again for coming on this show. And this brings us to the end of the episode. It's been really fun talking to you, Mike.
I know, Ulamumi. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of Marketing Over Wine. To listen to more career stories of marketing professionals around the world, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or any podcast app of your choice. Or simply visit marketingoverwine.com to stay up to date.